Here and Now, the program featuring the news and interests of the African American community. Here's your host, Sandra Bookman.
Coming up, the investigative journalist whose work led to convictions in some of the most notorious crimes in the nation, including the murder of Medgar Evers and that deadly church bombing in Birmingham. Also ahead, preparing the next generation to take on environmental inequities in communities of color. ELOC's fight to combat climate change. Later, the first female president of Medgar Evers College. And for the first time on Broadway, the classic Death of a Salesman told from a Black perspective. That's all ahead on Here and Now. Earlier this month, the Museum of Political Corruption presented our next guest with the 2022 Nellie Bly Award for Investigative Reporting. For some 3 decades, journalist Jerry Mitchell's reporting has led to convictions in some of the nation's most notorious crimes, including the murder of Medgar Evers and the 1963 bombing of the Birmingham church in which 4 girls were killed. He now heads the nonprofit, the Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting. Joining us now, award-winning journalist Jerry Mitchell. What a pleasure it is to meet you.
Well, it's great to be with you, Sandra. Thanks so much for having me.
It is our pleasure. You know, the last few years have not been so kind to journalists. I don't know how many times I've had fake news yelled at me on the street. And I said to you only half jokingly, I feel like the work that you've done over the last 30 years, you have single-handedly managed to keep journalism alive and noble. And we appreciate you for that.
Well, I feel like that. I feel very humbled by this. And just I think journalism is one of the most noble professions in the world. And I just feel very appreciative of being a part of it.
One of the things that you've done that obviously really caught our attention was the fact that you have reported on many of these notorious cold cases when nobody else could seem to figure out what the truth was, and you were able to do that. I mean, cases that, you know, as a Black woman, I've grown up hearing all about: the Medgar Evers, the assassination of Medgar Evers, the 1963 bombing at the church in Birmingham. You managed to do investigative pieces, and there were arrests in those cases. Tell me, you know, how this sort of became something you focused on in your career. Why was this important to you?
You know, Fannie Lou Hamer, who's one of my heroes, said one time that someone asked her, "Why did you choose to join the civil rights movement?" And she said, "I didn't choose it; it chose me." And I kind of feel that way. It's not like I was some expert in civil rights history or any of this, but rather I was kind of thrust into it. I happened to see a movie called Mississippi Burning, which is a fictional film. It's a fictional film about 3 civil rights workers that were killed here in Mississippi during Freedom Summer. And I happened to see the movie with 2 FBI agents who investigated the case. And so after the movie was over with, there are more than 20 Klansmen involved in killing these 3 young men, and nobody ever prosecuted for murder. And that was something I couldn't wrap my head around. I covered courts, and I'm like, what? These guys got away with not just a murder, but a triple murder, and nobody ever got prosecuted for murder. I'm like, why not? You know, and so I think probably too, being from another generation and being at least a tiny bit of an outsider, being, you know, growing up in Texas, I felt like, why not? Well, you know, what's the deal? And so I began digging into that case, and then eventually led me to the Medgar Evers case, and that case was reopened and re-prosecuted. Went and interviewed the killer, Byron D. LeBeck, at his home. That was absolutely the most racist person I ever sat down with and talked with.
And even the years hadn't changed him any.
No, in fact, probably more racist. You know, he was like inward this, inward that. started in all the other non-white races was very anti-Semitic. I mean, you know how some people you talk with at the end of, you start feeling like by the end of the conversation, you need to get a bath or something,
Yeah. Yeah.
That
You're
was
just
what it
they
felt
wore
like.
you out. Mm-hmm.
And so it was getting dark. He insisted on like walking me out to the car. And I'm like, that's okay. I think I can find my way. So he walked me out to the car and says, if you write positive things about white Caucasian Christians, God will bless you. If you write negative things about white Caucasian Christians, God will punish you. If God does not punish you directly, several individuals will do it for him.
Did you ever hear from him after he was
Oh yeah.
convicted?
Oh yeah. He at the time I went and interviewed with him, he didn't realize I was the one that wrote the story, got the case reopened. But he got indicted in the case, fought extradition, wound up back in Mississippi, and he saw me across the courtroom. By this time, he'd figured that out, right? So he saw me across the courtroom and said, "You see that boy over there? When he dies, he's going to Africa." And I turned to a friend of mine and went, always wanted to go to Africa.
What did you have really, look, we said Byron De La Beckwith, Samuel Bowers, the former leader of the Mississippi White Knights, Bobby Cherry, who was convicted in the 1963 bombing at the 16th Street Church. Did you ever fear for your life in any of these instances, reporting on these things, making sure justice was done all these years later?
Yeah, well, I got not surprisingly a series of death threats from Beckwith, from other, Klansmen and et cetera. But like one guy said he wanted to see my throat slit and things like that. It's disconcerting and obviously don't like it, but it kind of led to an unexpected gift, and that's the gift of living fearlessly, because living fearlessly is not about living without fear. It's about living beyond fear. And that's what you see with Medgar Evers, Dr. King, and so many others, Murray Evers. They live for something greater than themselves. And so I just feel if Medgar Evers can do that, shouldn't I be able to do that?
Why is it so important to you that you see justice in these cases? I mean, truthfully, you are a journalist, but you could have been writing about any other things.
No.
Why these cases? Why this?
I think what made these cases so horrible was not just that these guys got away with murder, but the fact that everybody knew they got away with murder. This was no secret that Byron De La Beckwith killed Medgar Evers. And so these guys, there were murderers among us. I mean, they were just walking the streets. And the idea that they had not been prosecuted, it just angered me, to be honest with you. And I would hope would anger anybody.
Well, I think it angered a lot of people, but maybe there are a lot of people that didn't have the skill set or ability to be able to do what you were able to do in terms of taking these cases, looking at it, and methodically putting the pieces together. Now, you've written a book, Race Against Time, chronicling some of this. Talk to me a little bit about that. And, we said cold cases. So I'm thinking in some ways the families had not necessarily put this behind them, but had learned to live with it. And then you come along, you dig it all up, but you get the results that they had always wanted to get. Talk to me a little bit about that as well.
Well, my relationship with the families was just incredibly special. I consider that, I've been fortunate enough in journalism to win some awards, but I always say the biggest reward I've ever gotten is getting to know these families. To get to know Murray Evers, and still we're friends, and she tells me I love you on the phone. How can you not, you know, I mean, I just love her and her family. I love the Vernon Damer family, the Lisa McNair, one of the sisters of Denise McNair, is a very good friend of mine as well. And Rena Evers, who's Merle's daughter. And
You're just such a
anyway,
name dropper.
Hey, hell, I'm not trying to, but anyway, I've just gotten to know all these families, and it's just what a blessing it's been. And but you're right. I mean, these families. I know Mrs. Damer said, the widow Vernon Damer said, people said, this is in the past, and she said it will never be the past for us.
Yeah.
And she's still alive, gratefully, and talked to her not long ago. I just love her to death. And there's now a statue of Vernon Damer outside the same courthouse that refused to let him vote.
Yeah. And I should mention, I don't know if all the viewers know who he is. He was killed in a firebombing in 1966, and he was somebody in Mississippi who had been helping other African Americans register to vote.
He had basically died defending his family against this Klan attack. The flames of the fire seared his lungs, and he died the next day.
Yeah.
And 3 weeks later came his voter registration card. He fought his whole life for the right of all Americans to be able to never been able to cast a ballot himself.
I want to ask you about some Carolyn Bryant, Donald, in the Emmett Till trial. There's a new movie, Till, that's going to be released soon, and or has been released. And based on your article, there's a thought that there may be some proof, additional proof, that she gave false testimony in that trial. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, I think there's absolute proof that she gave false testimony at trial. She spoke to the defense lawyer, her husband's defense lawyer, before the trial began. And there were notes of this. The defense lawyer took notes. They made them into the hands of William Bradford Huey, who wrote about this case. We could, Huey's a whole nother conversation. But anyway, these notes, she basically said, in terms of what happened in the store, which I understand the movie doesn't even portray, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But what happened inside the store, this is all according to her now. This is Emmett Till version, which we unfortunately don't have. But according to her, Emmett Till came in, grabbed her hand, asked for a date, walked away, said goodbye, and then whistled at her once he was outside the store, which the cousins confirmed he did whistle at her. So that's it. But by the time, a few weeks later, the defense lawyer for her husband gets up and basically says she's been all but raped. And she basically mirrors that testimony. So in other words, she lied when she testified. There's no question of her lying when she testified, and then talked to the FBI and essentially stuck to that story. So she lied to the FBI too. And it's unfortunate. And the grand jury decided against indictment. They presented it again. But anybody who knows anything about grand juries, you always wonder, what evidence did they actually hear?
Exactly.
And the other thing is, to my knowledge, they didn't have a copy of what I had a copy of, which is a copy of her memoir, because I have Carolyn Bryant's memoir. And in her memoir, she doubles down on this. She claims Emmett Till identified himself to his killers. Well, I don't believe that anymore. Anymore in Man Moon. It's just ridiculous. She doubles down in her memoir. She doesn't recant. There's this, story out there that she supposedly recanted. She didn't recant. I mean, it's very obvious she didn't recant from her memoir. So this whole idea that she somehow recanted her testimony is just not true.
Yeah. Can I ask you, I want to, when I introduced you, I explained that you were now head of a nonprofit. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Right.
It's the Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting.
Yes, it is. And I think we're doing some amazing work. We, in 2019, we investigated Mississippi prisons. This led to the Justice Department investigating Mississippi prisons. In fact, they just came out with a report on Parchment Prison, which basically confirmed a lot of the reporting that we did about horrific conditions, et cetera, inside the prison. We did publish recently, as I mentioned, Carolyn Bryant's memoir. No one else had that, and we published it. Excerpts from it, not the whole thing, obviously, but excerpts from it. We've done did it. Mississippi had a very similar case to George Floyd. I was able to get a hold of video and basically show these officers piling on top of a guy named Robert Loggins, who, once they got off of him, never breathed, died, never breathes again, and it was blamed on meth. And the level of meth was, according to pathologists that I talked to, wasn't even that high. So there are all these different things that we continue to report on that are important. We're currently reporting on. We're started working on. I'll tell you about the wrongful conviction case we're working on. It involves a Black mother of 4 named Tamisha Shelton, and so she's in prison for life for a murder that even the original pathologist believes didn't take place. So it was ruled a homicide when it should have been ruled a suicide, and so she's in prison for life for this. And in addition to that, there's proof now that the deputies lied when they said that she was wiping her hands, trying to get gunpowder residue off her hands, because they gave her the test at the scene. And therefore, they all testified she got the test at the sheriff's office. But it just wasn't true. They tested her at the scene, which is what you're supposed to do.
Okay.
So anyway, it's all these things, and she had handled the gun. Of course, she's going to have gunpowder residue on her hands. She had handled the gun. The guy asked for a gun to kill a raccoon. So this little dang tiny 22 pistol, loaded it and handed it to him. He goes out. She hears a shot. He never comes back. So she goes out to investigate, and there he is. And it's a sad story. I mean, we don't want to see anyone commit suicide, but it's not a homicide.
Not a homicide. Okay. You love what you do, don't you?
I do. I'm passionate about it.
And I must say you do it very well, to the benefit of a whole lot of people. Jerry Mitchell, what a pleasure to talk with you.
Well, it's wonderful to talk to you. Thank you for having me.
Sandra Bookman, and Here and Now. We'll be right back.
Environmental justice demands that all people have access to a clean, safe, and sustainable environment without regard to race, color, or national origin. Environmental Leaders of Color is an organization whose mission is to educate and advocate when it comes to climate change and its impact. Joining us this afternoon is Dr. Diana K. Williams, president and co-founder of Environmental Leaders of Color. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon.
My pleasure.
You have taken on a hugely important task here. Tell me, why is this something that you feel like you need to get other people to pay attention to and sign on to?
I think that the dramatic effects of climate change is something that vulnerable communities need to know about. And they need to know about it because they're the ones who have longer recovery time, and they have less resources to battle the effects of climate change. We all remember what happened during Hurricane Katrina, when Americans were trying to cross a bridge for safety and other Americans welcomed them with guns. And so we don't want that to happen again. We want people in our community to know what to do for climate change. We want our young people to be part of the solution to climate change. And this is why I do what I do.
Have you, when it comes to talking about these issues, environmental justice, climate change, why we should be recycling, that, I know that's a simple thing. Do you feel like the message is being heard or not heard differently in communities of color? And as you put it, vulnerable communities? And why or why not?
Well, I think that there are a lot of competition for information, correct? People have cell phones, they have Netflix, they have many things they can do. And so one of the things we did, and I think we did quite well, is that we got students for 6 weeks who were already attending or participating in summer programs, and we have them for 90 minutes a day. And there's nothing else for them to do but listen to our stories. And one of the most dramatic things about our program is that we found that when we did a post survey, we found that many of the children go home and tell their parents about what they've learned. And so we're using these children as the soldiers for education about climate change. We've had parents meet us in the supermarket who tell us that, I know who you are. My son or my daughter said they'll tell me everything they learn about climate change and all the things we have to do to prevent it.
Yeah.
So yes, so I think that the children are our future and are our soldiers.
And so talk to me a little bit about what you do to get the word out and what kinds of things that you're telling people that they can do to make a difference. That because I think the first thing a lot of folks think is, I don't have time for that. It's too much. It's not, I don't have time to do that. So two questions. How are you getting your word out? One is, I know you're using the children, you're teaching them and they go home and tell their parents, much like I think we've seen in the past with cigarettes and the need to wear seatbelts. You teach the kid, they're going to make sure the parents are doing what they're supposed to do. What kinds of things are you able to do to get the word out?
So we use our children. The mission of environmental leaders of color is to educate communities about climate change and its impact. So right now we are concentrating on using children, and so we use children in two ways. We have them get the word out, but also we're trying to get them into educational programs where they can become energy engineers and environmentalists. And we feel very positive that the solution to climate change can come from anyone and everyone. And we believe that students from vulnerable communities can contribute much to the whole climate change experience and change the outcome.
And what is one simple thing or some things that we can all do at home to start that process? If it's something that we've not really been engaged in, what is something? Because sometimes people just don't know where to start.
Okay, I will tell you one thing that will have a profound effect, and that is reducing the use of plastics. Did you know that the plastic bottle you use today and you dispose of today will take 1,000 years to decompose? 1,000 years. That is a very long time. And why I talk about plastics is because the petroleum industry makes plastics. The plastics come from petroleum. And as more people use less fossil fuels to heat their home or to run their cars, the petroleum industry is trying to find another use for plastics. So plastics is going to consume us. So I tell people, try to find a different thing to use than plastics. Yeah. If you can reduce the use of, recycle your plastic, take it to the Salvation Army. Someone might be able to use that plastic bag or that plastic bowl or that plastic storage container. I was looking in my closet the other day and I realized that the foot lockers we used to use that were metal are no longer metal, they're plastics. Everything is going back towards plastic.
And it's harmful.
And it is very harmful.
Can we recycle our way out of this mess? It's going to take more than that, won't it?
Well, can we recycle our way out of plastics?
Out of any of it, really. I mean, it's going to take a little bit more than just recycling. And I mean, we got to really change our mindset and our habits.
Well, one of the ways that we can change our habits, of course, is activism. We can appeal to our elected officials to support programs where we don't use harmful chemicals in to contaminate our waterways. That we have corporations being mindful citizens of what's going on in our world. Can we change anything? You know, no one can predict the future. I have a lot of confidence in the human race. I really believe that if we put our minds together, our efforts together, and our talents together, we can make a difference. And for the sake of our children, I don't want to give up. This is their future. We have to be involved in solution-based thinking and solution-based activities for their sake.
So if folks want to find out more about the work that environmental leaders of color that you do, ELOC.earth, correct?
That is correct.
All right.
Correct.
Thank you so much for talking with us today, because it's important for all of us to listen and take some action. So we appreciate you and the work that you do, Ms. Williams. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, and it's been my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Sandra Bookman, and Here and Now. We'll be right back.
6 years after civil rights activist Medgar Evers was gunned down in his driveway in Mississippi, Medgar Evers College was established in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. That was 1969. And just last year, the four-year institution appointed its first female president. Joining us today is Dr. Patricia Ramsey, the sixth president of Medgar Evers College. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Ramsey, and congratulations. I know it's not a brand new job, but we are so happy to have you and proud of you.
Well, thank you, and I'm pleased to be here today.
And, you know, we kind of make a big deal sometimes when we say the first woman, but why is that significant to you?
Well, I think that because Medgar Evers College started with an enrollment predominantly of women. It's significant for the college, but even now, close to 75% of our students are female. And I think that it's important that females are able to see others who look like them, that let them know then I can aspire to be a president or a CEO if that is what I wish to do.
And why is this a job that you think you were tailor-made for, besides being a woman?
Well, in addition to being a female, I'm also the first scientist to be president of the institution. And I have a wealth of experience over the years working at different types of institutions, starting out with a public institution in the area of advancement, institutional advancement. But I really wanted to make a difference as it relates to the academics of institutions. And so I went into the academic aspect of higher education, and I've served as a chief academic officer at like 4 institutions. And I've been approached by a number of people regarding considering being a president. I think I've been well prepared for that. I have worked in systems and in single institutions, but I have chosen to work at historically Black institutions all of my career as it relates to administrative roles. And therefore, I feel strongly that it has prepared me for a time such as this.
You know, given its namesake, Medgar Evers, social justice has also always sort of been at the forefront at Medgar Evers College. Is that something you see as so almost the raison d'etre for the university's existence, for the college's existence?
That is absolutely correct. And Medgar Evers College is very unique in that Medgar Evers College was birthed out of community. There was a group of people in Central Brooklyn who felt that there should be a college for the people in the community, but they wanted a college that provided bachelor's degrees. And so there was an advocacy for this, and they formed a coalition, the Bedford-Stuyvesant Coalition, and they had a steering committee led by Dr. Al Van, recently deceased Dr. Al Van. But on that committee, also that steering committee was a woman, Ms. Ella Cease. You don't hear very much about her, but she wrote Governor Rockefeller every Friday from her kitchen table for 6 years, advocating to get a 4-year institution in Central Brooklyn, which ultimately did happen. So I always say that Medgar Evers College is an institution birthed out of community with social justice in its DNA. And social justice is a big part of everything that we do, mission focused on social justice.
And I have to ask you, as president, is there any, I think maybe it's not fair to say, well, what are your plans for the college? But is there something that you have in the back of your mind, and you've been there now for some months, that you know what, I think that this is something that I can bring new to the table that will really fit here and make a difference for my students and administration?
Well, one of the things that I heard coming into Medgar Evers, and I'm finding even currently, is that Medgar Evers is a hidden gem in New York City. There are a lot of great things that go on at this institution that people don't know about. And so we're trying to do all that we can to win friends and influence people for Medgar Evers College, because we as an institution are providing a valuable resource to the nation. For example, and the nation is looking for more people of color to go into STEM disciplines. Well, the largest degree major at this institution is a STEM major, and that would be my major, biology. And so we are already doing more than many institutions are, because 75% of our students, 78% of our students are African American. And so if you have the largest major being biology, that means that we are contributing to one of the nation's priorities in producing more people of color in STEM. And so that's something that I'm trying to get that message out there. But also everything that we do has a focus on social justice. And with the background that I have, I think it's very great that I'm able to understand the need for things such as equity in healthcare, equity in looking at the environment. And so we've done some things very recently where we are going to be contributing to those arenas as well. And so there are a number of things that I see that Medgar Evers can contribute to the nation. And when I was looking at the institution, I said, I would like to see Medgar Evers College become a model of social justice for this nation. And we're doing a number of things, I think, that can help move us in that direction.
Yeah, it sounds great, and it sounds exciting, especially for your students. I want to ask you about, there was a great deal made of a $20 million grant awarded by the former mayor here in New York City. Talk to me a little bit about how those funds will be used to contribute to your vision for the university.
Well, one of the things that we know, those programs at the institution where there are a lot of wraparound services and where students have financial support, those students are able to do better and graduate from the institution at a higher rate. And so the funds actually are being used because we actually received the funds in the fall of 2021. The funds are being used to provide scholarships for students. And those scholarships are through a program that we call the CHAMPS program. We wanted to have a very positive spend on the program so that the students would not feel that, they would be looked at to say, oh, well, you guys are getting this money because you don't have funds, or that type of thing. But we have the CHAMPS program, which provides the students with scholarships, Metro cards, and books, because many times we look at scholarships, but the students may not have the ability to even get to school. And so we provide them Metro cards as well. But additionally, a part of that was the economic recovery, looking at the economic recovery of Brooklyn after the pandemic. And so the other part of that funding is for internships through our Brooklyn Recovery Corps program that we developed. And we partner with small businesses and nonprofits in Brooklyn. And those nonprofits and small businesses then take in our students as interns, and our interns are paid by us through the funding that came from that $20 million grant. We have a number of partners, and the partners actually are vetted because they have to apply, because we want to make sure that our students are going to get meaningful experiences. And we have a number of students that went through that program in the fall, and another class we brought in this spring. By the time we finish, we will have had over 500 students to go through that internship program. And so the money is currently being used in that manner. And that was really what I asked for in the proposal when we wrote the proposal to the former mayor to get this funding.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you, there was a City Council Finance and Higher Education Committee report that showed that enrollment was declining in 6 of its community colleges. What's your enrollment been like at Medgar Evers?
Well, just as across the nation, we've had an impact of the pandemic. We've had an impact here at Medgar Evers as well. One of the things that I'm sure you know is that the governor put in place a requirement that all students who attended these institutions, these public institutions, had to be vaccinated. And so we had a number of students that we lost because there are people who just did not want to get vaccinated. And we had some over 400 students, for example, in that category when we started talking to students, trying to get them to consider vaccination. But of course, if people have made up their minds, it's very difficult to get them to change. But the other thing that I wanted to know about the institution is really what was our average credit load at the institution. And so very recently, what I discovered is that we have 11.9 is the average credit load, which means we really are a part-time institution. And so when you start looking at things like retention and graduation rates, all of that affects that because of the formula that the federal government has put in place. And if I could advocate for anything for minority serving institutions, because all of us fall in the same category, and that would be that the federal government would change the formula by which it determines retention and graduation rates, because that's first time, full-time, first semester, degree-seeking students that they look at that cohort that returns in the fall. Well, if a student returns in the fall and they return as part-time, guess what? They're not counted.
Not counted. Okay.
And so all of these things impact everything that we do as it relates to how the public sees us. And so if you're having challenges with your students coming back full time because they don't have the funding, then of course that impacts enrollment. But one great thing that has happened in New York is that our governor has put in place the ability now for students to apply for TAP as part-timers.
Yeah.
And so that will help, because one of the things that we have found that also impacts enrollment is students' ability to pay. Okay. And so about 88% of our students that we had come in last year were able to pay. Well, if they have not paid in that previous year, then all we're doing is worsening the situation by bringing them back the following year, because it increases their debt.
Okay. Dr. Patricia Ramsey, I got a feeling that Medgar Evers is in good hands with you.
Thank you.
It is a pleasure to meet you, and keep us posted on the work that you're doing there. And any way we can assist, we are happy to do so. Dr. Patricia Ramsey, thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Sandra Bookman, and Here and Now. We'll be right back.
The terrible thing is happening to him. So attention must be paid. He's not to be allowed to fall into his grave like an old dog.
Death of a Salesman is the quintessential American play. And now, for the first time on Broadway, Arthur Miller's classic is being told from the perspective of a Black family living and working during the time of the Great Migration. That is when millions of African Americans left the South in search of a better life in northern cities.
Today is all cut and dry. There's no chance of bringing friendship to bear or personality. You see what I mean? They don't know me anymore.
That's just the thing,
If I
Ray.
have $40, that's all I need, Howard.
Kid,
$40.
I can't take blood from a stone.
Howard! In the year Al Smith was nominated, your father came to me.
I've got to
and
see
said,
some people,
I'm
kid.
talking about your father! There were promises made across his chest. You mustn't tell me you have people to see. I put 34 years into this firm, Howard, and now I can't pay my insurance. You can't eat the orange and throw the peel away. A man is not a piece of fruit.
Joining us this afternoon is the director of Death of a Salesman, Miranda Cromwell, and award-winning composer, Femi Timowa. Thank you both for being with us this afternoon.
Hey.
I got to ask you, so I know you worked on the show in London before you got here, and I would say that you had a pretty good idea of what a big success you had. But was it intimidating? Both of you can ask this question, sort of taking on this classic American play with a slightly different twist? We'll start with you, Miranda.
Definitely. I mean, this is a masterpiece. It is the classic American play, and I never dreamed that we would be bringing it to a New York audience. So it was really challenging and thrilling, and it didn't disappoint, that's for sure. It was an incredible experience to be here, so different and surreal to what I expected, but so rich and worthwhile.
And to me, I do think the music must, first of all, it always plays such a role in the mood, the setting of a mood. And I mean, it kind of leads you that way a lot of time, or even sometimes confirms whatever you're feeling or thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it does that. That's kind of the dream result that you want, especially making music for theater with theater. I'll say actually, and you know, kind of point back to your earlier question. For me, it wasn't. I wasn't daunted by the story because I didn't know it that well when we started out. I was daunted by the fact that I was being asked to make music for theater, you know, at that initial stage, because it wasn't something I'd done before. But once we got into it and I saw through the eyes of the directors and the actors, the vastness of the world that we were trying to create, that's when I was like, oh my goodness, this is a huge deal beyond just the music that I was making, you know, and to kind of hint at something a bit further, it became very quickly apparent to me that I needed to make music that was going to act as a character in the play, which is why you say you can feel and it can confirm what you're feeling as the narrative progresses.
And I have to ask you, Miranda, Death of a Salesman, to me, it's sort of the subject matter is universal in a way. But when the family becomes African American, there are so many layers to being Black in this country, and especially the time period even of the play. You know, how do you go about? You don't necessarily have to change the words or any of that, but the setting itself and who these characters are really does sort of inform, you know, what their lives might have been like. Is that something that you have to really be conscious of when you start directing this play with African-American actors? Or does the fact that they are Black already inform the characters? I
mean, I would have to say it was central to the whole conception of this production. So, I mean, we employed 3 different researchers, and we have the likes of Wendell Pierce and Andre de Shields, and in previous incarnations, you know, Joseph Meidel, giving their experience of what it is to be Black in America and what their previous, you know, their grandfathers, their grandmothers, what they went through. And what happens as soon as you read it with that in mind, the text transforms. I would say so much of like people are bringing their own lived experience onto this space. And for me, like working with American actors who have had that lived experience, where the history is that close, brought so much more too. But even in the storyboarding, in the conception, in the idea of like where Willie would have been selling, where they would have gone to school, what his experience would have been like working for a white boss or having an affair with a white woman in a time where it would have been illegal in Massachusetts. And there's even a line in the play that says, I think there's a law about it in Massachusetts, which is actually relating to just an affair in general. But obviously, so many of the themes just become deeper. The language takes on its own meaning because of the subtext of what these actors are bringing just from their own lived experience.
Yeah. And in a lot of way, it also says something about the quality of the work itself, does it not? That maybe they're not so subtle changes, but in a sense they are, because the work itself still stands up and you still recognize it's Death of a Salesman.
I mean, we really changed, I think, 3 words in the whole play. Everything else remains exactly intact, and it is the power of this play. It's so beautifully crafted, and it's a universal story that I really hope everybody can see themselves in, and I hope that our production illuminates that.
Femi, I have to ask you, when you start talking about music, you talked about it being another character in this play. Are there things that you did for this production of Death of a Salesman, and I know it was theater, that were particular to these characters in this place and the fact that they were Black in terms of the musical presentation?
Yes, absolutely. When we first started out on this journey, I remember first sitting down with Miranda and Marianne Elliott, who was a co-director on the London productions, and they themselves had done a bunch of research on what they considered the landscape to be. And in that there was some jazz, there was some blues, some elements of gospel, just the kind of stuff that I guess for want of a better term is Black American music, stuff from the Black American music canon. And and having kind of grown up with that music myself, although I'm not African American, I'm part of that kind of larger global diaspora that has embraced that music, having been born African and seeing the relationships between those music and what I grew up with. So having that already in my own kind of system was really, really helpful when we began the journey. And one of the early things that Miranda wanted to explore, which I found really, really exciting, was how do we get it so that the music becomes a kind of a Willie's mindset in some instances. When he talks to his kids in his head, he hears music back, and so we were exploring things like that and thinking, well, what kind of music would he hear? He's a Black man living in Brooklyn in 49. Probably it would be some version of those
musical genres,
elements that are Black American music. Yeah, exactly.
Well, that kind of challenge.
We really,
No, I was going to say that kind of challenge has to really appeal to someone like you.
Absolutely. It was, I reveled in it. I went to work every day completely ready for the, whatever that day would bring. And, we had so many days where we'd literally just kind of spend a couple of hours here and there just jamming. I'll bring in little excerpts of music that I'd written and, kind of interplay it to the actors and see how they felt about it and get their perspective, how they felt it worked for their character and their journey in those characters.
And I have to ask both of you, what was opening night like? Just the feeling of opening night. You can each tell me what you think.
It was like a surreal dream. It was impossible to kind of put into words. This is a culmination of so many people's years of dedication and hard work, and I felt just an outpouring of love and pride for this company of actors, this beautiful company of creatives and producers and the crew and the stage management. Making theatre is such a labor of love, and it requires so much dedication from so many people. So when you can be able to be together and celebrate like that, when an audience responds in that way, and it all just feels so worth it.
Yeah. Femi?
Yeah, I agree completely. For me, it was a waking dream, you know, just kind of sitting there. And I felt like I could feel the actors on that day saying to themselves, let's really tell this story. Let's give it everything we got. And it moved me so much. I mean, at the end of the play that night, I just couldn't stop crying. It was incredibly, I mean, apart from the fact that the story was moving, but having shared space with these amazing people, knowing how committed and how they all felt about the power of the story and why it's important to tell it now.
Yeah.
That was really moving. So moving.
Congratulations to both of you. You have worked hard enough, and you deserve this success in this moment in the spotlight. And if I send folks to salesmanonbroadway.com, they need to run and get tickets now.
Right now.
All right. Thank you both.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you so much, Sandra.
Sandra Bookman, and Here and Now. We'll be right back.
Thank you for joining us on Here and Now. If you missed any portion of today's show, you can watch at abc7ny.com. If you'd like to comment or share your story, email us at abc7ny or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm Sandra Bookman. Enjoy the rest of your day.